This episode is for the writer who feels a little intimidated by memoir. Maybe you've always been writing, or maybe writing is new to you. I've actually worked with a lot of writers who will say, I actually never considered myself a writer before I wanted to do this. So if that's you, you're in good company. I see it a lot. Regardless, you feel like a deer in the headlights sometimes. With the publishing industry being so glamorized, it can be hard to see where you fit in. In today's episode, I'm going into 4 elements about memoir and publishing that I had wrong, and how reframing those concepts changed my entire experience as both a writer and an editor. So whether you're early in the drafting process or you have 70,000 words tucked away in a folder on your laptop, these mindset shifts are what will free you to write your book and publish it. Let's get into it.
You are listening to the Memoir Method podcast, the place for writers, readers, and anyone who appreciates the collective power of our stories. In this podcast, we explore the impact of memoir alongside an examination of writing techniques and strategies used in the genre. Whether you are a writer looking for inspiration and guidance or a passionate reader seeking meaningful connections through shared experiences, the Memoir Method podcast is your go-to conversation spot. I'm your host, Charlotte, editor, writer, and the heart behind Charlotte Writes. Let's get started.
The first thing that I had wrong about memoir, and this is one that I used to believe a little bit, and it was one I debunked pretty quickly. And if you're here listening to this, you've probably debunked this already as well, but it's something that I hear a lot from writers and from think pieces and people within the cultural commentary. But number 1 is that you have to be famous to publish a memoir. You don't have to be famous. I used to believe that memoir was for celebrities, politicians, or survivors of something incredibly dramatic. I can't tell you how many times I have worked with writers who have felt that their life or their story wasn't intense enough to be worthy to be written about. And why they think this? It's because these are the books that get the biggest marketing push in the traditional world. It's easy to sell sensation. It's easy to sell based on a personality or celebrity. So yes, if you're here listening to this podcast episode, this is a memoir myth you've probably debunked already, but the shadow of celebrity and dramatics can still hang over us when we think about selling memoir or promoting it. There's going to be that little voice in the back of your mind saying, well, I'm not famous. Who would pick this up? Who would care? So that your story is important to you, but you can secretly doubt if it would be important to anyone else. So yes, this model exists that celebrities are the only ones who sell a lot of memoir, who can be picked up by publishers. But it's not the model that you need to follow. It's not the only one out there. We'll get into this in the next myth as well. But being a celebrity is one way to get your memoir out there. It's not the only way. Inside the Memoir Method and in my work with writers, I work with writers who are not famous. I've never once worked with a celebrity, but they are thoughtful, reflective, and powerful storytellers. They are published authors. And it's really, really cool to see these writers find their readers. So the reframe that I invite you into here is that to write a memoir, you don't need fame. You just need something to say. And if you feel pulled to write, even if you're not quite sure what that message is yet, that is your signal. There is something there. We just get to find it. That is what phase 1 of the Memoir Method is all about, is digging deep into your story and figuring out the message behind it, figuring out the conversation that you are here to have with your story. That is all in phase 1 of the Memoir Method. It is the most foundational work that I do as an editor with writers, is figure that out first. So you don't need to be famous. You just need to have something to say. And I can assure you that if you want to write a memoir, if that's a desire that's on your heart, that's why you're here listening to this, then you do have something to say. And we get to find it together. Tangentially, the second myth about memoir, the second thing that I had wrong about memoir, is that you have to have something interesting, air quotes, to write about. But the question is, who defines interesting? The thing is that the adjective interesting is completely subjective. It's, again, this plays into the traditional publishing model that is subject to trends and subjective opinions of agents, editors, publishers, right? So interesting is a very, very subjective way to talk about memoir and publishing. What's going to be interesting to one person is not going to be interesting to another. I have friends who I will be talking with, and sometimes it's usually a new friend, and I'll say, oh, I love to read. And they'll start to share with me books that they found really interesting. And I'll be like, I don't find that interesting. So interesting is so subjective. And in full transparency, when it comes to memoir specifically, my favorite memoirs are about ordinary people living ordinary lives. It's the author's perspective and articulation about their lived experience that resonate the most with me, not whether or not they had a dramatic childhood. There are books that I will go into where I feel more voyeuristic, almost like, oh my gosh, this is so dramatic. This is so dysfunctional. What happened? But those aren't usually the ones that resonate the most with me, if that makes sense. So your reader, your ideal reader, isn't exactly looking for drama. They're seeking resonance. And often, sometimes dramatic stories can resonate with the right people, especially if they've had a similarly dramatic or dysfunctional childhood or background. They're going to really resonate with those dramatic, dysfunctional memoirs. But that's not a necessity to write and publish. The necessity is finding what's resonant with the right reader. And you've probably heard me say this before, but memoir is not about what happened to you. It's not about the actual story. It's about what you did with what happened to you. It's about the meaning that you pulled from it. It's about the conversation that the story sparks. The narrative that you shape around your life, that is what becomes powerful, not the details on their own. Your memoir is so much more about the conversation around the story more than the actual story itself. So your reframe for the myth that you have to have something, quote, interesting to write about is this. It's not about having the best story. Again, completely subjective. It's about having the clearest lens as an author. Memoir works the best when it is focused, purposeful, and resonant with the reader. That is what gives memoir emotional weight and resonance. Okay, number 3. The third thing that I had wrong about memoir, and this is one that might hit a bit of a nerve for you, and it was a huge reframe for me, but I believed that I had to wait until I had a published book to take myself seriously. And the biggest secret to this is that that is a completely backwards way of seeing publishing. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on my history as a writer. Early in my writing life, I had started a simple blog. Nothing fancy. I wrote from the heart and I hit publish. This was like back with Blogger, like from Google, like a really long time ago. At first, my readers were mostly people that I knew, but eventually strangers found my work. People would share what I wrote with other people I didn't know. And I built a decent readership. And that still blows me away. When I started this, I was a fresh high school graduate, actually. And I was just excited to have somewhere to publish my work online. It was really fun and it was new. And I had no ego around it. I just wrote because it was fun. And I didn't write expecting readers necessarily. So I wasn't disappointed when they didn't flood in. But ironically enough, I built a readership because I was writing and publishing online. I no longer have that specific blog, but I do have a Substack account, a Substack page where I publish essays. I will link that in the show notes. But in just a few months, I've grown it to almost 100 subscribers, most of whom don't know me personally. Maybe you'll hear that number, 100 isn't a lot. A publisher isn't going to pay attention to 100 people. But when I think about myself in a room with 100 people, like, that feels amazing. Like, if there were 100 people in a room who were all here to read or listen to what I had to say, that'd feel amazing. So again, it's the way that we think about our audience that is going to really determine how we progress and how we attract more readers. I only post 2 to 3 times a month on my Substack, but each post has reach. Each post gets shared. I get comments and messages from people who are touched by what I write. Most of them are from people that I don't know. They share it with their friends and family members. So I don't have a published book yet. I have been published in other publications. I don't have a book of my own that is published yet, but I do have an audience to nurture already. And spoiler alert, traditional publishing is much more inclined to sign an author with an existing author platform. So consider this your invitation to start your own Substack. I actually will get way more into the marketing side of publishing and the author platform side of publishing in phase 3 of the Memoir method. I'll talk about that at the end, but that is all in phase 3. So why is this working? Like, why do I already have an audience without a published book yet? I have an audience because I treat my writing really seriously. I treat myself as a writer very seriously. I'm not waiting for external validation to show up as an author. So here's your reframe. You don't become an author after you're published. It's not publication that makes you an author. You become an author when you start moving like one, when you decide to be one, when you start acting like one and showing up like one. You can start doing that right now. The internet makes it incredibly easy to show up as an author today. The fourth thing I had wrong about Memoir is that Memoir is about the author. And this is a yes and no. But it's not really about the author. What I write is not actually about me. And I've been writing creative nonfiction for most of my life. I've always loved personal narrative. I've always loved essays. And so I get this pull. You want to tell your story. You want to share your insights, your experiences. But memoir is a really delicate dance. This is between your lived experience and the message that your reader needs to hear. So you get to hold both in tension with the other. So here's how you can think about it. Your story is the vehicle, but it's not the destination or even the landscape. Your story is the vehicle by which you share your message, by which you spark the conversation. Memoirists who stay in this is my story mode often get stuck. They often overwrite, rewrite, over-edit, and it can start to feel self-indulgent if a writer stays only focused on their story. But when you zoom out and ask yourself, what is the conversation I want to have with my reader? That's when things start to shift. When you start to take your lived experience that is about you because you lived it, but when you start to consider how that can apply in a more general way or in a way that's more specific to your reader, when you start to think about the message behind it, the conversation embedded in it, that's when things start to shift in the writing and editing. This is where your authority as an author is born. You start to see your story as a springboard for ongoing conversation, something that is living and breathing on its own, something that readers are drawn to because they've been looking for someone to have this exact conversation. So your memoir is about you and it's not. And when I started seeing the difference, the slight nuances behind effective memoir, it's finding that resonance with the reader. And when you can only find a resonance with the reader when you stop focusing on yourself. Because you're not just the main character in your story, you're the narrator, you're the guide. Inside of the Memoir method, I help you step into that authority and lead with clarity and help you figure out when you need to write as a character, when you need to write like a narrator. It's a delicate dance and balance that we figure out, and that's so much easier to figure out when you know the message that you're here to carry, when you know the conversation that you're here to have. These mindset shifts took me several years to realize, to embrace, to embody. Once I did, everything about how I wrote and how I edit shifted. The way that I interact with writers is so much more big picture thinking. I said this in a previous episode. I'm here for the visionary. I'm here for the author who is ready to have an impact. So if you are ready to stop second guessing your process, your story, you want to step into this role as an author, as a thought leader, as a conversation starter, I would love to have you inside the Memoir Method. This is my signature program where I take you through the 3 phases of memoir writing and publication. Phase 1 is available instant access right now, and we dive into phase 2 in August. I'll put a link in the show notes so that will discount your enrollment by over $500. This is the program I take every single one of my writers through. This is the last program that you'll need because you are ready to write your last draft. Memoir Method is going to take you from that foundational work where we identify the message all the way through to publication for you. If you want to test the waters first, if you're not sure whether the Memoir Method would be a good fit for you, I do have a private podcast series called Published. This is a 4-part series. It's separate from this podcast feed. It's a whole separate podcast feed that will be emailed to you. But this is the perfect place to start. 4 short episodes. You can binge it in under an hour. These go into even more reframes that are deeper from what I've shared here even, that are going to help you retool and refine what you think you know about publishing and writing memoir. The links to all of that is in the show notes. Working with writers is my favorite work. It is fun for me. It is exciting. I love having the conversations that my writers want to have. I love helping them figure out the conversations that they want to have. I love helping them amplify that conversation and that message through their story. These principles are tried and true, and they build on each other. And I've seen it work with every single writer that I've worked with. So I would love to have you in my world. You can hop into the free private podcast series Published. You can hop into the Memoir Method. This is where everything starts to change for you. I can't wait to see you there. I'll see you next week.
You've just listened to an episode of the Memoir Method podcast. The Memoir Method podcast is presented by Charlotte Writes. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support the show is to subscribe through your preferred podcast player. And if you're feeling especially inspired, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review really does help other readers and writers like yourself find the show. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on my website at charlottewrites.co or on Instagram at charlottejanewrites. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. And remember that you have a story that matters.